Nkandla, even if we are discussing very serious matters, a man stand up, point of order. Yes, Nkandla. Tix was a George Cook. Hey.
Well, that's former President Jacob Zuma. My guest this evening is former DA federal leader Tony Leon. So how do you feel, I mean, when you saw that, that clip there, Tony? This is your former boss. It takes me back to the time when you were ambassador to Argentina. You were appointed by President Jacob Zuma. So how do you remember him?
I was.
Yeah, so...
Well, in that period, in 2009, quite fondly, I mean, you know, look, when Jacob Zuma offered me an ambassadorship, he said to me, I think it was very true then, it's true now, he said South Africa needs to be represented by faces other than ANC faces. And at the time, there was probably no better non-ANC recognisable face than me. And I'd stood down after 13 years as the party leader and 20 years as an MP. And I thought if I can do something of value for the country without being a party politician, I'd do it. And certainly did in Argentina, I think. The facts speak for themselves. And, you know, we were front and centre of the Football World Cup then in South Africa in my second year of ambassadorship, 2010. And all three of the countries I was in, Uruguay, Paraguay and Argentina, were, of course, here. And Argentina's having a very stiff battle this year in Moscow, and Uruguay easier, and Paraguay not there at all. But I think, you know, we proved that we could do a lot for South Africa, regardless of party political labels. And I still believe that to this day, and I don't think you have to sell out, and I certainly didn't, any of your core principles to do things for South Africa as a South African. And if the president from another organisation of your country asks you to serve, I think you can also do that with your head held high.
Now, Tony, we were talking about internal factional battles within the DA and the ANC. When you look at what happened to President Zuma, do you think it was fair the way he was treated by the ANC?
Well, I think it was overdue the way he was treated by the ANC. I mean, the country was really on the brink of a precipice, and I think certainly in his second term, Jacob Zuma dragged us pretty much to the cliff's edge and bears a great deal of personal, political and moral responsibility for the state that the country is currently in as a consequence of really his misgovernance and his sheer recklessness and worse with both public monies and public trust. So I think the ANC were very patient with him. I also think, you know, if they didn't want to do it for constitutional, moral or political reasons, their electoral fortunes were being read to them by the voters back in 2016 when the ANC, this once mighty ruling party, was reduced to a 54% party and lost control of 3 of its major metros. I think any party that didn't act against the person who was the chief agent of those misfortunes would have been indeed delinquent itself if they hadn't taken the steps they did.
Now, he seems still to be a factor for the ANC in the battles that you referred to earlier on. So how, as now a commentator, analyst, observing what's going on within the ANC, how do you think they're going to resolve their internal problems?
Well, I think Cyril Ramaphosa needs to show a bit more courage than he's shown in steering this down. I mean, Jacob Zuma is not the only sort of ex-president of an organisation who's tried to rule from the political grave. He seems to do it because not enough people in his own party today stand up to stop him. And I think it would be relatively easy for Ramaphosa to do it because, you know, to quote Pompey the Great, far more people worship a rising sun than a setting sun. And frankly, the sun has set on Jacob Zuma. Maybe his acolytes, his allies and so on are still embedded in the party, but just in the, you know, in the law of gravity, apart from anything else, never mind the law of politics, you know, you can't really sustain something which has really ceased to have too much velocity. And I think that, you know, Zuma's ticket has been punched. And whether the Zumaites, or the people who surround him, accommodate themselves to the new governing realities or not, will depend on what the new chief of government, President Ramaphosa, does or doesn't do. And, you know, Cyril seems to be acting in a very crab-like fashion. Maybe he thinks he should be cautious. I would think this is the time to move quite boldly. But then, of course, I'm not head of the ANC.
Yeah, well, but here's the situation, Tony. I suppose President Ramaphosa has got his eye on the elections, right? And he's got to deal with all the internal challenges that we know about. But at the same time, the country has got to be fixed. So, you know, what are the specific things that you think the president should be moving on in as far as the country is concerned, the kinds of things that he needs to fix with speed?
Well, I think, you know, he started to fix some of them in terms of, you know, sorting out the disaster of state-owned enterprise. That can't be done over a long weekend. It's going to take a long time, but at least he's appointing some competent people and getting rid of some incompetent and dishonest people who bestrode those SOEs. I also think he's doing the right thing on SARS, which has also been allowed to be a centre of state capture by appointing the Nugent Commission of Inquiry, and they will no doubt make recommendations. And, you know, he's made some good appointments in the key economic ministries. That being said, and to quote a saying from the Obama White House, Obama's foreign policy guys used to say, we don't do the stupid stuff. And I think in that regard, Ramaphosa is doing a lot of the stupid stuff to sort of buy off his left flank. So, for instance, you know, you appoint a new chap at Eskom and he hits the ground running. He says we can't afford any salary increases, start at 0%, and suddenly the government retreats because the government intervened there at the first whiff of gunfire. So that's, you know, that's sending a signal to the whole labour market. Actually, we don't mean what we say, even though we've got no money. And we saw that in the civil servants' wage settlement. 30 billion rand blown on that, above the inflation wage increases, and, you know, we can't afford it. So that's, I think, doing one of the stupid things, because you're at the same time trying to hold up a flag of fiscal responsibility and putting on the hair shirt. The second thing is, I think all this populism, both on the NHI bill and on the land question, and I'm not, incidentally, because it's very easy to shoot down any opposition, say, you speak for the privileged, you speak for the rich, you speak for what? Actually, it is a question of whether or not all other remedies that we have been exhausted. And, you know, I think, frankly, it's irresponsible, and Ramaphosa is the head of the cabinet, for a cabinet minister like the Minister of Health to come along with a bill that's not costed. And when he's asked how it's going to be paid for, he says that's for the Treasury. Well, you don't put your wares out in public until you've done the most carefully scrutinized study, and then you go to the public and say, this is our proposal. But this seems to me flying by the seat of your pants, and I don't think that's a good way to govern, quite frankly.
And it takes me back to the time of the drafting of the Constitution. You were part of that, and Cyril Ramaphosa was the chairperson or one of the co-chairpersons of that. When you go back to the way the Constitution was put together, the role that he played there, what kind of strength do you think he can draw from the Constitution itself, as well as from his own personality, to make sure that he directs the country accordingly?
Well, he can draw a great deal, and he should get a great deal of credit. And I always pay it to him, because I was in the room. I was not just in the plenary. I was in some side rooms with Cyril when that was being put together, both in 1993 and in 1996. And he played a singular role, and he was a consummate deal maker. And he was also, you know, very tough-minded when he wanted to be. But having said that, and given him all the praise that he deserves and the credit which he's received, I need to say this latest wheeze of Cyril and the ANC of saying, well, actually, we're now putting Section 25, the property clause, up for auction, is extraordinary, because I was in a room, literally, in Parliament, in the old Assembly, the night before that Constitution, with my late colleague Dean Smuts, and with Cyril, and with Dullah Omar and one or two others. And we were dealing with this clause because it was very unsatisfactory, hadn't been resolved. And Cyril knew then, and he knows now, that what we put together was a compromise between what was called the land lobby, and today we can call them the EFF, and what were the interests of the property classes in this country. Now, we can disparage those property classes as much as we like, and Cyril Ramaphosa is one of the biggest property owners in this country. But we also, if we chase them away, if we tell them you're not wanted, if we tell them your property is at risk, our economy will collapse. It's not an argument about morality, it's an argument about reality. And few people, more than Cyril Ramaphosa, know that better. Now, you can argue that Jacob Zuma came from a very different tradition, but Ramaphosa is from, you know, is now basically raining on a parade that he created, and to what end?
But
For
now,
what end?
quick question to you, a brief response from you, Tony. You said you think he needs to be given a chance and then he can get the country on the right path. You still hold that view? You took flack for that.
Oh, I took flack because I think Cyril Ramaphosa is a game changer, and some rather, I thought, dim-witted provincial leader, the DA, said, oh, well, if you think that, you should join the ANC. Well, if you don't recognize that there's a huge difference between Cyril Ramaphosa and Jacob Zuma, you're on the wrong field, or you should be playing another game. And, you know, I maintain that, and notwithstanding that, you know, a lot of the gloss has gone off the early part of the Cyril honeymoon, inevitably, as he starts to govern. You know, I think he's a person of intelligence, of subtlety, of know-how, and he can do a great deal. Whether he has the courage and the political character to do it, well, I think that will be revealed sooner rather than later.
Tony Leon, former leader of the DA, thank you very much for having been my guest. And after the break, leader of the United Democratic Movement, Bantu Holomisa, will be joining me on the couch.